Crimson Desert is one of the most frustrating games I've played this year. It wastes your time, explains nothing, and fights you on basic things like controls and UI. And I still couldn't stop playing it, because when it works, it's kind of incredible. Let me explain. But before anything else, let me give you a quick example. It took me like 2 minutes of furiously trying to engage in a conversation with an NPC. Not because I didn't know how, the interact prompt just wouldn't show up and I was constantly pushed back by some weird collision, like it was a reverse magnet or something. And that's kind of how this game feels like early on. Now, quick context for anyone coming in fresh. Crimson Desert is an open-world action RPG from Pearl Abyss, the studio behind Black Desert Online. Single player set in a massive medieval fantasy continent. You play as Cliff, a mercenary captain. That's roughly the extent of the story worth explaining upfront. The game launched, got review bombed early, and then weirdly it recovered. Steam reviews went from around 51% positive to 78% positive in 4 days after launch patches hit. That's either a sign the game was rough at launch or a sign the day one crowd were expecting something different. It's probably both. Now let's start with the obvious one. This game is visually stunning and not just good for an open world, it's genuinely stunning. I work as an environment artist in the games industry and I'm going to be a bit more specific here and there. The terrain blending is excellent, the way different biomaterials transition into each other, the surface detail at close range, the lighting, rock formations, ruins, the way moss and vegetation sit on architecture, it's convincing in a way that most open worlds don't quite reach. The draw distances are also remarkable for how dense the world is. No obvious pop-ins during normal play, only the usual few, which is harder to achieve than it actually looks. Distant objects transition into simplified textures and flat color LODs, which help reduce draw calls and make this scale possible. And this is where the contradiction starts, because the environments look incredible and the characters standing in them sometimes look like they belong in a different game, like Black Desert. Hair and skin specifically. The hair rendering looks dated, the skin shading is inconsistent, some characters look fine in direct light, but put them in shadow or indoors and it all falls apart. It feels like a priority imbalance. The world geometry shading got all the attention and character materials didn't get the same level of iteration. Cutscene animations are also mixed. Some are genuinely cinematic, others have audio desync or facial expressions that don't match the tone of the scene. That's not a technical limitation, it's just a polish issue. Now, DLSS also introduces problems. In low light conditions or rain, the image can break down visually. Noise, shimmer, ghosting, it gets distracting enough that I ended up turning it off. Interior lighting can also be inconsistent. You walk into a cave and everything is aggressively orange from the torchlight. So visually this game swings between genuinely stunning and noticeably rough, sometimes all within the same scene. Look at the small clutter on the ground. It appears at 5 meters. Look at the armors on these guys, bro. Holy crap. Wait. I want them to stop. Loot was sent to storage. Okay, whatever. Just watch the armor. I don't even know what's happening here. It's like some weird low nip maps are displayed. I don't even know what's happening with the textures on this armor. This is the thing with this game, you know, when you're looking like this, you're like, wow, this looks awesome. It's the second coming of Jesus, you know, because it looks cool. But at close inspection, look, from this distance, that guy's armor looks pretty bad actually. And look at the tiles on the ground right there. What's that artifacting? And I don't even have, oh, actually I have. Okay, let's turn everything off. No, it's even worse. And I have 55 to 60 FPS. So nothing helps. Nothing helps. So now I'm full native, right? And I have Everything maxed out. Maybe you need to get rid of some of these things to make it look better. I don't even know. Oh wow. Without ray tracing, it looks really sad. Holy crap. Wow. I think I'm gonna vomit. Yeah, night and day. Holy crap. So I don't even know what to say about this. Let's run DLA. No, it's the same thing. And that weird blur appears. With ray reconstruction, it's gone. All the noise is gone, but look at the ghosting. And all the artifacts. I don't even know what's worse, to be honest. I have no clue. But I hate this, all this noise that appears everywhere. Yeah, so this is it with the graphics. I think this church or whatever it is, it's a great example of it. It's a great example because you can see here, actually you could see here most of the things I was talking about. Look at the water, man. So yeah. Sound design is mostly a win. Ambient audio is very rich with wind, water, forest. It does a good job overall of making the world feel alive. Combat sounds have some weight. Boss abilities have clear audio cues that actually help with timing once you learn them. The music just works, epic when it needs to be, restrained when it doesn't. Nothing particularly memorable on its own, but it supports the experience pretty damn good. Voice acting also is decent, but it feels very studio recorded. There's not much environmental reverb or spatial variation, so characters tend to sound the same regardless of where they are. Now let's talk a bit about gameplay systems. Because there are a lot of them. This is where the game either clicks for you or it completely loses you. Because Crimson Desert is packed with systems, not just one or two layers of chem management, crafting, followers, buffs, exploration rewards, and they're actually good. The problem is the game does a terrible job explaining why you should care about any of them. Chem management works well, you build and upgrade, assign followers, produce resources, cook, craft. It's basically a mini base building system inside the open world. Gathering and crafting feed into that loop in a way that makes them feel purposeful. Traversal, particularly on horseback, is enjoyable. They've clearly carried over some of the video horse quality and it shows. Riding through the landscape at a decent pace is one of those low-key satisfying things the game just does right. Discovery feels decent too, stumbling into a camp, running into a side event, finding something you weren't looking for. It happens all the time. It doesn't feel entirely manufactured, you know. There's a naturalism to the exploration that I truly appreciated. But when you are on foot though, you realize the game just puts roadblocks after roadblocks in front of you, you know, because reaching point B from point A, if you don't have some roads that tie the two places together, you will need to go across mountains and stuff. And it's cool in the beginning, you know, climbing and jumping around, but it gets old at some point, you know, and it's just tedious. So when you are exploring an area for the first time, when you're in look for those teleportation points, it can be painful if you're on foot, if there are no roads. Exploration is kind of rewarding. There's a lot to find: dungeons, hidden areas, side objectives. If you like wandering, there's like 50 plus hours here. Followers are interesting in theory, but I kept forgetting how to actually engage with them in a meaningful way. That's partly on the UI, which is inconsistent and doesn't guide you well. Player freedom is a big plus. Most objectives can be approached in multiple ways. You have different environmental routes. The game rarely forces one solution, but onboarding is a real problem. The first 8 to 10 hours are rough because you are constantly doing things without understanding why. That's not a complexity issue, it's a communication issue. Now, combat is the most subjective system in the game. Crimson Desert combat is flashy, combo-driven action system with RPG depth, built around timing, weapon variety and large-scale encounters. But it starts slow. The first few hours feel basic because you don't have the tools yet. There was a point around hour 12 to 15 where it finally clicked for me, and that's when I understood what the system was trying to do. Every new ability improves your existing toolkit because of how everything chains together. Boss fights are a highlight, they're readable, visually impressive, and feel fair once you understand the patterns. The post-launch patches helped a lot there, combat responsiveness improved, bosses were tuned, and the overall flow feels better now than it did at launch. Mountain combat exists, so there's that. Now, controls, let's talk about them for a bit. On mouse and keyboard is the only control scheme I tried, because I don't own any controllers. On mouse and keyboard, this game launched in a state that's hard to justify. To be fair, Pearl Abyss acknowledged it and has been patching it, but some issues still remain. At launch, there were no basic keybinds, no I for inventory, no M for map. You pressed escape and the game randomly opened a menu, That's been fixed, but the fact that it shipped like that is still baffling to me. Movement feels slightly delayed, it's better now after a patch, but still not tight enough in my opinion. The bigger issue is the inconsistency between activities. Combat controls make sense once you learn them. Outside of combat though, everything changes. Fishing uses a radial menu instead of a direct input. Looting is inconsistent. Sometimes the interact prompt doesn't show and you're just adjusting your position until it appears. The lantern has its own aiming logic separate from the combat. Knowledge acquisition requires holding a key that doesn't feel natural in the flow of exploration. Minigames use entirely different input systems. The overall feeling is that the game was designed controller first, or I don't even know. But it seems like mouse and keyboard was added in a rush later. That's my vibe at least. You can adapt though, it took me a few hours, but that adjustment period shouldn't really exist. Now let's talk about the performance and the value proposition. The performance is solid overall. Everyone is praising it. On a 4090 the game runs well but reasonable settings. Actually everything is maxed out, but DLSS introduces visual artifacts, ghosting, shimmer, enough that I turn it off at times. Yeah, and that affects performance. I only have like 60-ish FPS without DLSS, and yeah, that's not good enough, for me at least. So good performance comes with some caveats depending on your setup. Now, in terms of value, there's a lot here. 60 to 100 plus hours if you engage with the systems and explore properly. And to their credit, Pearl Abyss patched the game aggressively after launch. That level of support actually matters, and credit where credit is due. Story and writing, the problem isn't just that the story is weak, it's that it feels completely disconnected from the quality of the world around it. The premise is fine, it revolves around Cliff, a mercenary leader of the Greymanes who is tasked with rebuilding his clan after being ambushed by the Black Bears. Boo. But the execution is kind of flat, Characters are a bit underdeveloped, dialogue lacks impact, there's no real emotional payoff. They tried some character development though, in form of all kinds of light-hearted dialogues while you ride with one of your companions to your next mission objective.
So Unka thought I looked like some scared little pup?
Nah, more like an abandoned wolf cub.
Well, it feels like shit to be the abandoned cub.
Is that why you can't pass an animal without wanting to take it in?
Right, we're here. Now, what was it Carl was after again?
I really enjoyed those, because during those moments you learn some of the backstory of the characters. Like you learn that they know each other since childhood and they did all kinds of crazy stuff, and it helps a bit, but it's not enough. Also, the tone is inconsistent. And the cutscenes, sadly, are unskippable. Whoa, that's bad. I mean, you can speed them up, but you cannot skip them. I wish I could just press escape and skip that entire thing. But yeah, I guess they wanted us to see the bad lip sync, something. I don't know. Now let's move to the big list of pros and cons, and I'll start with the pros. So I'm easing you in. World design and the environment are exceptional. I'm always gonna start with this when I'm talking about Crimson Desert, because that's the highlight for me. The biome variety, as I said, the terrain blending, surface detail, this is some of the best open world environment work I've seen in recent years. As someone who does this professionally, I can tell you the level of care put into these environments is not standard. Whoever built these landscapes put in serious hours. So graphics are gorgeous and the draw distances are insane. For a world this dense, the lack of popping, it's a technical achievement. Pearl Labs clearly invested real engineering time into their rendering pipeline to pull this off. Combat is visceral and keeps getting better. It starts slow because you don't have the moves yet, but I don't know, after 10 or so hours or 15 hours, you're chaining combos that feel genuinely satisfying. The system rewards investment. Every new unlock makes your existing toolkit better. When it clicks hard. But you can also just spam left click the entire game. But hey, that's also a pro for some people, I guess. Me included, actually. That's how I went through the game mostly. Boss fights are a genuine highlight. They have readable patterns, real visual spectacle, a sense of weight to each encounter. The best bosses in this game rival anything in the action RPG genre right now. So there's that. Player freedom to approach objectives your way. The game rarely forces one path. That kind of design freedom is rarer than it should be. The camp system is cool. Follower assignment, crafting loops, cooking, resource chains is a full progression system on top of the main game. You can ignore most of it, or you can go deep and feel a completely different kind of progression curve. Both approaches work. Performance, as I said, is solid. With caveats, on a 4090 the game runs well at reasonable settings. Even if native resolution with ray reconstruction is off the table for now. Or I had 60 FPS, as I said, with ray reconstruction and native resolution, so I didn't like it. And it felt like I had less than 60, by the way. That's the thing, because 60 FPS on paper should be enough. But yeah, the game is playable and smooth once you find your sweet spot settings. Now, developer support has been fast and committed multiple meaningful patches in the first week post-launch. Mouse and keyboard controls improved, combat rebalanced, camp storage added, that's a big plus, fast travel points expanded. That turnaround speed signals Pearl Labs is treating this as a long-term product, not a ship and move on situation. The sound design does its job well, combat audio has weight, ambient sounds make the world feel alive. The score doesn't overstay its welcome, nothing groundbreaking, but nothing that pulls you out of the experience either. Massive content volume for the price. If you engage with the systems and explore properly, you are looking at 60 to 100 plus hours. The world rewards curiosity at every turn. A lot of fast travel points, so I believe they increased their number with a patch, but I'm not sure, so yeah, there's that. It's just that I found a lot of those points after some patch. Look, I stopped the movement right here. The camera has this weird inertia. Oh my god. I hate this. Now let's talk about the cons. The story and writing are weak, as I said. The premise works, the execution doesn't. Flat dialogue, underdeveloped characters, no emotional payoff. Itemization is where I started losing patience though. All gear has roughly the same stats with minor variations, which sounds fine until you realize what that means in practice. Every time you find something new, you have to refine it just to bring it up to the level of gear you already had. The game already gives you these items at a high enough level, but it's like one level below your current gear. Well, at least this is what I noticed. And it's still annoying that you need to upgrade that gear to become as powerful as your current gear. I don't know, it feels off, and it feels like homework, by the way, because this forces you to go mine and gather all kinds of stuff, and on later refinement levels you will need a lot of rare resources that won't spawn everywhere, you know, like iron and copper in the beginning. There are the unskippable cutscenes. You're locked into dialogue that's already not landing with no way to skip it. That's baffling in 2026. As I said, hair and skin rendering lag behind the environment. The contrast between gorgeous world geometry and rough character materials is hard to unsee once you notice it. Cutscene animation, sync issues, audio doesn't always match mouth movements or facial expressions. A polish problem, not a technical limitation. Don't forget that. Interact prompt randomly disappears on NPCs and loot. Annoying. And actually, not only that, it disappears even from your quest objectives sometimes. You need to introduce a dagger into a tiny little hole, and you need to press Ctrl to actually make it appear. And in the other situations, you don't. That's the thing that bothers me, because it's not consistent. It's all this inconsistency that drives me nuts, you know. Sometimes it works, and sometimes the same thing doesn't work. Now, the next thing, you cannot reject missions. This takes away the player's agency. You don't want to clean this chimney. Well, too bad, because you initiated the conversation. The quest now exists in your journal. Sure, you still have the choice of doing it or not doing it, but it's annoying. The puzzle design relies on withheld information. That this is so big for me, because in this world there are a lot of puzzles, and several of them are effectively unsolvable without a guide. Not because they're clever though, but because critical information is missing. And listen, I'm not saying you cannot do them, because clearly someone did them the first time, you know, and did the first guide, sure, but not many people have that kind of patience, you know. When you have this puzzle where you need to rotate these things, and you realize you need to find two murals that, yeah, you have roughly a map on each of the walls in that room, but it's grungy and washed out, and when you realize you need to go in two different places that's pretty far away, you just want you at that moment you just look up for a guide and yeah, just align them like that guy in the video does it, and you're done with it. It's the payoff, and that's the especially what annoys me. The payoff is not there, and some of the puzzles are, yeah, pretty easy to solve alone by yourself. I mean, you don't need guides for everything, but some of them, nah. It's like the designers who did that hated humanity or something. I don't know. So yeah, the solutions must be placed cleverly in the proximity of the puzzle, not spread around the world. The controls are, as I said multiple times already, are highly inconsistent across activities on mouse and keyboard at least. Combat, fishing, looting, puzzles, lantern, all feel like different games. I feel like it's designed controller first, and it shows. Then again, I hear the controller scheme was horrendous at launch at least. The DLSS implementation has serious artifact issues, ghosting and shimmer that are distracting enough to turn off entirely. Enemy variety is severely lacking, and that's another big one for me. For a world this large and this visually impressive, the enemy roster is disappointingly thin. Same body types with minor reskins, which makes exploration feel repetitive in ways the environment never does. When I walk into a fantasy world like this, where clearly magic exists, fantastical creature exists, because you have dragons, you have some variety, some enemy variety. I'm not saying that's not there at all, but I expect a lot of variety, you know. I expect this part of the forest to be with spiders, you know. That part of the, I don't know, rocky wastes should be with some rock elemental. Whatever, you got the idea. Maybe I got too accustomed with games like World of Warcraft. I don't know, but I expected this, and for me it was a real problem having to fight bandits everywhere. The first hours are rough. The game doesn't open up for a long time. The real risk of losing players before it gets good. So From time to time you'll do one of these missions where you need to liberate a big area of the map with a lot of points of interest, you know, castle, a keep, whatever all these are. To do that you have all sorts of objectives and you need to clear a lot of enemies, guys. Look around me, look on the minimap, it's full of crosses. That's loot. And just so you have an idea, just look, I'm full. I'm always full, and it's very annoying to deal with this. The freaking dog is useless. I didn't even summon him because it's that's a problem, because it fills up your inventory with all. And one more thing, what's the point of having a companion when you actually cannot use her at all? You cannot play with her like 95% of the time. What's the point? You cannot zoom in and out of the minimap. That's something that I felt the need to. So yeah, I don't know. I somehow expected this feature to exist. Nothing else to say really. There's no difficulty settings, so you get what you get. If you want the game to be easier, you cannot do that. If you want the game to be harder, you cannot do that. So there's that. Now the final verdict. So for me, this game was a 7.5 out of 10. And that score comes with a pretty big asterisk, because this is one of those games where your experience will depend entirely on what you're willing to tolerate and what you're expecting. So if you like deep systems, exploration and figuring things out on your own, there's genuinely great game here. If you want strong narrative, tight controls from the start and a smooth onboarding, this probably isn't it. So for me, the environment work carried a lot of the experience. I kept wanting to see what's over the next hill, and then over the next one, and so on. And eventually I realized I'd seen it all already. Because you'll reach that point also before you finish the game. I'm 100% positive about this. Now, Crimson Desert is ambitious, inconsistent, and sometimes genuinely frustrating. But when it works, it's kind of incredible. And that's what makes it so hard to put down and just as easy to walk away from. If you played it and noticed I got something wrong, please let me know. And if you want more context of this game's development, watch this video next, where I just read 2 posts I stumbled upon Reddit made by current and former developers of the game explaining how things are run in Pearl Abyss. So yeah, there's that. Please watch that. Spread it around, because people need to see, and these kind of I don't know, practices need to stop. Anyway, this is all I got, and see you in the next one.